Wonderful. I love your hair. I love your top. You look
Oh,
fabulous.
thank you. Thank you. I said that because I'm in South Florida, so we're very much still on quarantine. And I said I love these opportunities because you get to pump some life back in yourself for a minute, and then I go back to my regular ways.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. I love it. So I want to jump right in. This topic, I am so passionate about it. We speak about it all the time within our single mother community
Mhm.
because we are typically the breadwinner for the family. And or even if we're co-parenting, we're dealing with a situation where the assets are being, split.
Right.
We're taking care of two households a lot of times. And so, not only introducing the world of how money works to mothers and how money works to our children, but really just going in and creating generational wealth. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic today because I know you are all about that.
Thank you. I'm glad
All
that
right,
you are bringing this to the forefront of the conversation too.
definitely, definitely. So the state of financial structure in the households of Black mothers. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What's going on in that structure right now?
Sure. So, um, this is something that once again, I'm very passionate about. For years, I have been focused just on Black families being able to change the narrative of their money story, and have been a big advocate on understanding the cultural sensitivities when it comes to mitigating through personal finance or business finance, and recognizing that a lot of the advice, reports, and information that's out there is a lot of it is biased or skewed from a different perception. So even when it comes to Black mothers and the financial space right now, you're not seeing it in headlines, but we just let a report in the last 90 days, the racial wealth gap has doubled. And so it has exponentially hit numbers that the Black community has never seen before. And there was an article in Forbes that just talked about how Black women are bearing the brunt of this recession. So not only are our unemployment rates drastically climbing, but then also taking the factor of being able to place kids in school, the support teams and support structure not necessarily being there in large numbers, and um, uh, just so much happening and so much transpiring that is drastically increasing the racial wealth gap at a significant rate. And so I think it's time we talk about that. I feel like we need to bring that to the forefront. There was a statistic that the Brookings Institute put out about a year and a half ago that said by 2053, if financial trends continue the way that they are, that the median Black wealth would be at $0. And I felt like that was a state of emergency then, right? That was state of Black mothers
Definitely.
then, and now it's increased, and and that's why I said I'm just so passionate about making sure that the awareness surrounds what's transpiring.
Now, what are some steps that we could take as a community and also individually within our households to close that gap?
There's quite a few things. So one, I always like to start at the macro level, right? And so a lot of things that have permeated that gap, that have increased that gap, are from a systematic standpoint, right? It's not, how much discipline you have, or, how much you try to make certain decisions, but there's policy and law and things that increase that wealth gap at a very strong level. So, always from a macro level, remembering as a Black mother what you have to do to change things at a larger percentage. So if that is making sure that you vote, if that's getting people around you to register to vote, if that is understanding, taking time. A lot of people, voted early. But when it was like, well, who are you voting for, and what are their policies, and what do they stand for? Some of those conversations have gotten left behind. It's not just voting, but putting people in who don't continuously perpetuate the systematic infrastructure that has caused or initiated a lot of the wealth gaps. So understanding that too, and then going to the micro level and figuring out what can we do to just change the trajectory of our money stories. And so I think estate planning and generational wealth is lies in the hands of many Black mothers. And when we say state of the Black mothers, I feel like that is the thing that we have to grab hold of. And so through this pandemic, you can see that Black families have been impacted the most as far as dealing with COVID, dealing with the effects of COVID, protesting. I mean, we're on the front lines. Black mothers are on the front lines, and I'm not taking anything away from the Black fathers or Black men. We're all out there together. But just because today the focus is mama to mama. So being a mom, I'm gonna talk to my mom.
That's right.
But we are out there. Yes. On the very, very front line of everything. We're out there on the front line of being the nurses and doctors in the hospitals. We're on the front line of taking care of the kids that are no longer in school. We're on the front line of trying to hold our houses together, and we're on the front line of the protests that are happening, across the nation. And so, in that, there are drastic dynamics that are happening, right? So the amount of people passing away from the pandemic is strongly impacting the Black community. So having our paperwork and our things in place so that the generational wealth does not transfer out of our hands during this time too. And I know it's hard to talk about money and life and those things, but we have to have those adult conversations right now, right? Like you turn on the news and you see that people are passing. And for me, it's become closer and closer and closer. I have friends who family members have passed, and I'm trying to help them sort out things because nothing was in place, right? Like, who does the house go to? Who does, if they had savings for them, how do they gain access when, there was no beneficiaries named? It's one thing to go through this tragedy, but it's another thing to have to deal with fighting for what was supposed to be left in the family's name on top of that. And please know that there are predators waiting for people to drop the ball in that area so that they can come in and take your land and continue gentrification, so that they can come and take, anything that you have not properly claimed. So starting with sitting down and really having those talks and getting the paperwork together. Anybody who is on this live right now, if you are 18 and up, you need to have your will, right? It doesn't matter. Many in our culture, many of us feel like that's something you should do when you are a senior citizen, or when I get to 65, I'm gonna do my will. But with what's going on in society right now, you just want to have all those things in place now. Having our emergency funds in place. So moms, especially a lot of my financial clients, there's not a lifeline of other members you can reach out to. Many of us are the lifelines for our families, right? So we're, if grandmother needs something, if aunt needs something, if uncle needs something, you're more than likely, many of us are the central point of that. So we don't know what society holds. We don't know what this recession holds. And so making sure you're doing your due diligence of having those savings in place is very, very important. And where everyone used to say,
I want to bring up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to bring into this conversation as well the conversation around life insurance in the Black family.
Sure.
Life insurance even having life insurance on our children as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, and a lot of times, they don't want to talk about death. They don't want to really get down to the business of death, right? Mm-hmm. And having a policy, making sure that you have enough coverage, really making sure that all parties are covered, you know,
Mm-hmm.
getting in your family's business.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the collection plate going
Right.
when someone passes away, or a car wash having to be the legacy that's being left behind because we weren't prepared. The resource was there, we just didn't take advantage of it. Can you hit on the importance of life insurance and maybe a couple of the different types of life insurance policies that we should be getting?
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at it culturally, many of the generations prior to us, they didn't trust the insurance man, right? For your grandmother or your great grandmother, the insurance man was a real, shady individual that kind of came around the house once a month with a briefcase. You gave money to it, and then you just hoped, things would work out. And for, more than half of individuals, it was a scam. The insurance man just, was out to get them like so many other people. And so you have that energy that was passed on to the next generation. Then you have the generations that followed after that, and they didn't see the benefit of life insurance, right? So it's like, I'm, going to pay all of this money while I'm living, where that money could go to something else. So now you have it to our generation and following generations, where we understand now that life insurance is for the living, right? And so whereas many people felt like it was just a benefit of death, we recognize that, from a cash advancement standpoint, being able to utilize it as a part of your wealth building strategy is what we have been missing as a part of our entire portfolio for years. And so, understanding life insurance and what role it plays in just making sure you can build legacy is very, very important. And then also too, when it comes to life insurance, there's strategies too. That's why you want to work with a really good life insurance professional. We have a lot of in our referral network for Amount Financial. We have some great individuals we work with, but I was talking to our life insurance expert the other day, and one of her clients, their parents are older, very much older, and they're doing all of their posthumous planning right now. And her parents were talking about how they felt really disappointed they couldn't leave a inheritance to the next generation. And she was going back and, talking to her insurance professional, and she told her, hey, you and your siblings can get together and take out $1 million policy on your parents, pay, into it. And then when their time on this earth is up, then technically they are leaving you an inheritance. Like, you able to strategize it in that way. So that strategy doesn't work for everybody, but understanding that there's more strategies, there's ways for your family to be your own bank. There's ways for you to use insurance, for you to do tax strategy, for you to do your investment strategy that turns it more into just an immediate transaction, is how you are setting up for future generations and for the DNA that you haven't even met yet, for the children in your bloodline you haven't met yet. There's strategy to how you're operating.
Now, Dr. Scott, can you tell us what is the website where moms can look for affordable life insurance options?
So there's a few different websites that we direct people to, just to be able to find out things. What's happening right now is, because the market is drastically changing, rates are going up and down, I'm always going to defer to a professional that is very in tuned into what's happening in the moment. So that's why we have our referral network. But outside of that, you can go to websites like NerdWallet and Balance and Yahoo Finance, and just a few of those to kind of compare and contrast what's happening in society and how does that play a role with you. And then you can run some numbers and get quotes, like if you change this, or if you do this, or if you contribute this much, how much is the cash policy against that. There's just different ways for you to play around with those numbers. So when you do sit down with a professional, you have some more insight. What we can't continue to keep doing, especially as mothers, is just taking everyone that we meet at face value. Some people are here to really see us win, and some people are here just to get their commission or to meet a quota. And so if you're armed with enough information, then you can sit down and know what are the key words and what are the key strategies you should be hearing from the financial professionals you're dealing with, and not just taking them at their word.
Got it. So education is key. That financial education is going to be key. So how can Black mothers instill healthy money habits in their family's culture?
So I love that question so much. So first and foremost, when you look at passing on generational wealth, and you look at the typical middle class Black family, the wealth only passes, the wealth does not typically pass to the next generation, right? So there's reports that talk about less than 20% pass on to the next generation. And so those numbers intrigue me. Like, why? What's happening? How are these other families able to pass on for hundreds and hundreds of years? And in our families, it's not making it past the initial earner of that money. And so one, it has a lot to do with mindset, right? So a lot of people are getting into their wealth space, and the first thing you might hear them say is, I want to work, I want to provide these things so that my child never has to work. And so when you are raising a Black child in America that has no experience with working, then what happens? Right? They don't know how to they don't know how to continue that baton, right? They don't understand the dynamics of working. Exactly. So
right. No work ethic, no structure.
Exactly. And no their maturity level of how to deal with finances and financial decisions is not there. So you create this life where your child never has to work because you have, this mindset on disdain for work. And then you turn all this money over to them, and you assume because they're an adult, they're supposed to know what to do. If you don't learn money, then it's not a skill set that just pops up as soon as you turn 21, right? So understanding that. And then two, you hear a lot of individuals in our community say, I want to give my child what what I never had. And so that starts a path of feeling emotional needs with materialistic value. Right. And that's something that highly permeates our community. Many of us are making financial decisions based upon an emotional void, if we're really honest about it. One of my friends is a therapist, and, she said a lot of people have that financial trauma, these, financial triggers that they don't classify as being related to money. They blame it on all these other things. But when it boils back down, it's that you have such a negative relationship with money. And so you don't want to pass that negative relationship on to your parents. Many of my clients who come from very wealthy backgrounds, their parents never brought them to a meeting, never talked about money, always said, stay out of grown folks' business. And they weren't even exposed to their level of privilege, right? So you just felt like being wealthy was the way of life. You didn't even understand that this was a gift, and you didn't understand how serious you needed to honor that gift to make sure that you could pass it on to your kids. So, just really tapping into that mindset is a big part of it.
So true. And just for my last question for you is, I know we touched on legacy a little bit there, and I just want to hit back onto that. So what are, having a will, what are, having a life insurance policy, are there about 5 things that people should be doing, mothers should be doing right now? Like, what are some things we could take away, call up our banker, call up a, financial advisor, and get those things done now to move toward the right steps?
Yes. So things that you should be doing right now, just in regards to your generational wealth as a whole. One, coming up with your generational wealth plan, starting with your family mission statement. So if it's you and your child, you, your spouse and your child, you, your mother, you and your sister, whoever that is, what does this family stand for? Coming up with that mission statement. What are we doing this for? What is our long-term reason for doing this? What do we want our last name to stand for? As we all participate in the consumption of America, those are last names that we're purchasing into. When you purchase Gucci, that's a family you're putting more money into their pocket. When you're staying at the Hilton, that's a family you're putting more. So what does your last name stand for? And coming up with that generational plan. And when you make that why bigger than you, when you make that why more holistic, then you're able to do it for the long term instead of thinking in the short term. Too many people, I'm making the assumption, because this is how we do as Black women. We got businesses on businesses. So if you are, if you have an entrepreneurial side to you, side hustle side, whatever that is, what's your business succession plan? How are you getting things in order so that you can pass this on to the next generation, or that if anything happens, like with what's happening in the world, that you're doing business correctly, right? So with many of the protests, there were quite a few Black businesses that were casualties of the war, right? But the thing is, that Black business owner is still 100% there for the movement, there for some of the Black businesses I know that were that got obstructed during that time, boarded up the business and went right back out to the protest themselves, because they had insurance and other things in place, right? So when you have your businesses operating in order, then you can show up for the movement, you can show up for the advancement of your people, and you can show up for the advancement of your family the way that you want to. But for those who don't have things in place, then it becomes an ultimate travesty, right? It's when you have to start a GoFundMe, or you have to, try to get everything back together. And you can't, at that point, you can't even focus on the advancement of our people, because you're just trying to keep the lights on, restore, things at a travesty rate. So you want to have those things in place. Next, you want to do your estate planning. So you want to start that now. You want to start making sure you have your will in place. You want to make sure that you have your living will, your power of attorney, your healthcare initiative, your beneficiaries listed, all those different things. If something was to happen to you and you need to pass your digital assets on as a part of the wealth building, right? So some of us have put so much into social media that it could continue to make money for our families if anything happened to us, but you don't just get to take over your family stuff, right? Like it's not like you just get to hop in and do that. Like, were proper passwords left? Were you named as someone who could be taken over? When you create your Facebook and Instagram accounts now, you're able to wheel those off to people. So making sure that you have those things in place. So those are just some
thank you so much. Thank you. This information has been amazing, Dr. Garner Scott. Really amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us today for the state of Black mothers in America.